Okay, so I'm going to start off by asking you to introduce yourselves.
So my name is Dimple Savla. I'm the Residence Life Coordinator at Vanier Residence on campus. So I work under the Department of Student Community and Leadership Development. And I'm currently pursuing my Master's in Education here at York. I am pursuing the thesis option, but still doing my coursework.
My name is Marc Caporiccio. Hi, everyone. And in September, I will be starting a Master's of Arts in Higher Education and Student Affairs at New York University. I am a graduate, an alumnus of York, class of 2011, and I was an involved student leader on campus, which made me very interested in this field of work.
Hello everyone, my name is Greg Langstaff, a recent graduate of York University's professional writing program. I'm currently working at Student Community and Leadership Development as the Leadership Program Coordinator. And in 2 weeks, I am going to Southeastern University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to begin my Master's in College Student Affairs.
Hi everyone, my name is David Ip Yam, recent graduate of York University. I'm currently working at Glendon as the Student Affairs Assistant. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so you already covered off what you're going to be studying and where you're going to be studying. I was just wondering maybe to understand, what was the driving force behind your decision to pursue your graduate education? Let's go David first.
Okay, yeah, so I forgot to mention, but in September I'm going to start a Master's in Education at York University. I think the driving force for me was getting involved, being a student leader, much like my three colleagues here, but also the frequency and intensity of interaction with staff and faculty. If it hadn't been for a couple of faculty members, especially staff members, I wouldn't have even considered grad school. I was thinking, do my undergrad, go to work. And my undergrad was in political science and French studies. So if it wasn't for that, the interaction there, and then being around other student leaders, then I don't think I would have considered grad school as an option. The other thing is being around the staff is seeing what type of work they do, and then realizing that I also share similar interests and skills. Then they would send me articles to read, programs to see and to explore with, and then that's how I knew I want to do this.
Okay, well, I've been at York for 6 years. I took a 6-year undergraduate experience, which has been fantastic. Along the way, I have met a lot of really great people who are working in the Student Affairs Department. For the most part, they're all really happy, all the time. So that's probably reason number one that I'm going into Student Affairs, because everyone I've met generally seems to be just in a great mood, and I've really enjoyed the work and working with people. And also the student leadership experience as the students are growing. It's so interesting to go through it yourself, and then now to start being a part of facilitating that, so reaching the next level, which is pretty exciting. So that's probably my reasons.
Well, let's see. I really wanted to develop as a professional in the field. My past experience in higher education and student affairs has been as a student leader, and so in my transition from being a student leader to a professional, I thought that a master's would really help my professional development and my learning of the theory behind some of the practice in the day-to-day life. And I also wanted to leave Toronto and go to New York. So, and I thought 2 years in the city would be a great break for me. No, well, that's definitely part of it. That's why I applied to NYU. The bigger part here is I wanted to develop as a professional, and also I really felt that a master's under my belt would open up more job opportunities for me. I noticed that in some of the job descriptions, the job postings that were being sent my way by people in the field, a lot of them had masters preferred, or a master's in education or a master's in arts required. So I noticed that if I wanted to apply and be a serious contender for some of these positions down the road, a master's would definitely be to my benefit.
So my journey was a little bit different. I did my bachelor's in education here in the concurrent program in my undergrad. And so I've always been on the teaching path. And since I was 6 years old, I've never wanted to do anything but teach. The past 12 months has been a big challenge for me because I'm now working in student affairs. And in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to go back and teach in a high school, which is the area that I'm qualified in. So my initial choice, or my driving force to do my master's, was because I had done my teaching placements in the area in the Jane Finch community, and I was working in residence at the time as well as a Don, and so I was being trained in and learning a lot about student development and issues of identity and diversity and all of these different issues which I saw in my students in high school, many of whom are now at York and are students at York, and kind of glance at me as they walk by me. They're like, I think I know you, but I'm not sure. But really what I wanted to do was research, and that's why I chose to apply for a master's program. Like I said, I want to go down the thesis route, so right now I'm still completing my coursework, but I'm looking, and was originally looking to do my thesis and research in the area of language acquisition, which is what I was qualified to teach. I think the driving force right now for me is that I've worked now at York in student affairs in residence life for a year. It's been 13 months, and I think I'm starting to change my perspective a little bit, which I think we'll get to later. But right now I think my driving force is realizing that student development in higher ed is just as much of a passion of mine as is student development in high school. And I think a big area that I'm interested in is first-year experience, which is a really big part of what we do in residence life and across campus in a lot of different ways. But like Marc mentioned, job opportunities for a lot of student affairs do include a master's. And although my focus right now is more on research and theory at the high school level, I'm realizing more and more that they're applicable both to higher ed and to high school, and that there is a gap right now, or what I see as a gap in the research of what happens between grade 12 or that grade 13 if students choose to go back to high school, and the year that they take off before they go to high school, or before they go to college or university, or if they're coming straight in. So students that we have coming into residence who are 16 if they've skipped a grade, or 17 if they're going straight from grade 12 to university. And is it fair to assume that they're now considered in the area of student development in higher ed, even though they've just completed high school only 2 months before? So I see that that's an opportunity for me, and I chose to initially pursue my master's to look more at student development in high school, but I think my thesis topic might change a lot in the next few months.
Yeah, I just want to say another thing. Along with more job opportunities, the fact that we work in a university, we need to collaborate and create synergies with the faculty side of the university, right? We're student services within a university, and I think that when we can adopt a similar paradigm as them by having a master's or a doctorate, it will help us create a better institution.
So one of the things that was kind of covered off is, that I'm aware of, is in the States, for example, there's a plethora of programs, and they've been having graduate education, student affairs, and student services for quite a while now. And what's been emerging in Canada is kind of programs here or there, but now you see more and more institutions offering master's level and doctorate level. So I guess my question would be, for people that you just looked and surveyed all this and doing your decision making, what is the kind of landscape? What are the main similarities or differences, both from maybe a Canadian or American program point of view, and also what programs did you consider when you were applying? So I know that we have two people that are going to the States. So I don't know, Marc, if you want to start off?
Sure. For some reason, I actually didn't start my search in Canada. I thank goodness for Google, right? So I just plugged it in there and, or no, I think that's what happened. I searched student affairs, higher education, master's programs, and the state's programs popped up in my search. So I looked through those, and in the states anyways, what I noticed is a lot of the programs are 2 years. I think, Greg, is your program too? Yeah, a lot of programs are 2 years, and there's also an internship component to that complements your studies. So in my case, in the NYU program, yes, it's a 2-year program, and there are 3 courses per term. And on top of that, there's an internship, a 20-hour per week internship that I'm expected to work. And so that was really appealing to me, the fact that I would be in a cohort of 40 other young professionals or new professionals to the field, and we would be learning from each other, with each other, over the course of 2 years. So there's a network that I would be building with American professionals, which is exciting. And on top of that, I would have an outlet, some sort of real life work experience where I could apply my learning. And that to me, as someone that's coming into the field, is great because, again, it's another piece that I could add to my portfolio of work experience.
A lot of what Marc said applies to my program as well. One of the reasons and I looked at a lot of programs in the States, and the classes they're really specific towards student affairs. You're taking classes like the 21st century college student, taking classes on college student personnel administration, law and student affairs, like very specific courses. So that was something I was really interested in. And again, the biggest pull was definitely the internships, the graduate assistant positions that were available, because you really, you're working, you're learning, and you're applying what you learn in class, and then you're applying what you learn in class to your work, and it just really builds on nicely. And the other cool thing, I don't know if your program has this or not, but in the summer, students usually will go somewhere else for an internship. So you go to another school and do, a graduate assistant position, maybe outside of your field. Like, I've never worked in residence life, and that's something I'm kind of interested in. So I might go try and find something like that for the summer in another city, or come back to Canada or wherever. I'm not sure. So that was another big pull for me.
What programs did you consider?
So I was mostly looking at programs in Ontario, and because I was qualified to teach in Ontario, I wanted to be able to work more closely with the curriculum here when I was doing my research. A big consideration for me was whether I wanted to go the coursework option or the thesis option, and there were a few programs that didn't offer a thesis option. So that was a big pull for me towards York, and another institution that I was looking at was the option to do coursework for the first year as a full-time program, and then the second year would be focused on doing a thesis. That's not to say that institutions that don't offer a thesis option are any less competitive or any less hold less weight in terms of their program. I think another big pull was looking at centers specific to certain areas of research. So something big for me personally was urban education and urban schooling and urban centers. So there are a few different institutions that have centers that are specific to urban education. Another big one was second language instruction or second language acquisition. So looking at specific programs within the actual graduate department and within the faculty of education were other considerations. And then also the timing. So whether you're looking at doing a part-time versus a full-time degree and how long that would take you. So there are some institutions that have 12-month programs, so it would be 3 full semesters, and it would be 1 year that you would consolidate all of your coursework into that 1 year, versus York, which is a 2-year full-time program, and then deciding personally whether I was choosing to do it full-time or part-time, and then how long that would take me as well.
Yeah, so I based my decision on, it narrowed my decision because I wanted to stay in Toronto. So I chose between U of T at OISE or York, and ended up choosing York. And so OISE, what I liked about OISE is that, well, first of all, it's coursework based. I know you can negotiate and do a thesis, but it's coursework based, and they do offer the cohort program, so you can move up with a small number of professionals, and you can do that on a part-time basis or full-time basis. The other thing I liked about OISE was that the courses were could be quite specific to student affairs, more so than York. So it's more similar to the programs in the States, and they did offer a GA-ship that would pay for the education. Now York, they offered the thesis option, or the MRP, Major Research Project, I think. And I liked that option because I wanted to do research. And I also liked the fact that it was specific enough to do student affairs, because they offer you can do it concurrently with your MEd, a graduate diploma in post-secondary education. So that can tack onto your MEd. But I liked it because the program is a bit more liberal arts based, I feel. You do talk about student experience, you do talk about a history of post-secondary education, but you also have a lot of a more liberal arts feel to it, and I come from a political science background, and I feel like I could use those skills and apply them in that program, and then come into the professional field with a bit of a different approach, I think, a more broad approach to things. I feel like it could be beneficial. And it worked for me because I'm actually working in the field right now, so I can balance the broadness with specific and apply the concepts. So it really does depend on your current circumstances in life. So I actually applied to be full-time, but then I got a job through York at Glendon, so then I switched to part-time. Anything else I want to mention? And then you always offer the GA-ship, but York offered the TA-ship, which would also pay for the education. So I think that there are opportunities in Ontario and abroad. And I also want to study in Ontario because I see myself working in Ontario, so I want to really learn about the issues facing post-secondary education in Ontario. That's Senator.
I just wanted to add, yes, the internships, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but for the most part they're paid. Is yours paid? I hope yours is
very
paid.
paid.
Okay, good.
Very paid.
That'd be awkward if it wasn't,
Yes.
or mine was, but okay. Yeah, so they are paid, so they generally cover the cost of one of the courses, or mine does anyway. It covers the cost of one of my courses. The other thing that really attracted me to NYU is in a lot of ways it reminds me of the York University environment, very progressive, liberal, so that was really attractive to me. And also, for this particular program, I didn't have to write the GRE, which was a plus, because that's another cost, it's another test. I didn't want to deal with that. So that was unique for NYU's application process. And also the structure of the program, it's based on what's called the Capstone Project. So it is a course-based master's, but in addition to the courses, there's this capstone where you're working on a professional philosophy statement, your portfolio, and also what they call participation points in higher education and related activities. So every time you attend a conference, you get points. Every time you do an international experience, you get a point. So it's kind of like a game in that way, and I really enjoyed the challenge. So I'm looking forward to the Capstone Project.
Yeah, the other thing I enjoyed, at first I was worried about which institution. I was really worried, like if I sign up for OISE or York, I'm tied to what they offer. But then I spoke to Ross, among others. Why don't you just take a course at, sign up for York and then take a course at OISE? And yeah, I can do that. So that's quite encouraging. Why don't you network with American professionals? Yeah, I can do that. That's true. Create a social network online with other professionals. That's true, right? So it became a lot less stressful.
So, next question gets into some of the application process, and you're thinking preparation for graduate programming, graduate education. So, what did you write about in your statement of intent or interest if you didn't necessarily know what you wanted to research? So, that's typically part of your application process. There's this big world out there. So, how did you prepare for that letter of interest or a statement of interest? And maybe want to identify what was the actual focus of yours? wants to go first?
Let me start by saying that I overthought it so much. Really, like the statement of interest it's meant to be a personal thing. So I was coming up with strategies. How do I appeal to them this way? And then I just sort of stopped and I wrote out a list of reasons why I wanted to study student affairs. And I'm in professional writing, so I do have a lot of writing experience. And from that list, I just sort of put together a short letter about why I really wanted to do it and where I wanted to go. And my program's not a thesis-based program, so I didn't have to get into any specific area of research. But that was really it. I started with why student affairs was so important to me, why I wanted to study it, what I wanted to get out of my experience, and then where I was planning on going from there.
I also found it to be, I found I was very anxious when I actually got to writing the piece, because in essence they're looking at your academics, your academic performance, in my case my resume, and this piece. So really it's this piece where you can kind of unleash some of your personality onto the page, I guess. And so I was having a hard time putting my personality and my interests into 1 or 2 page document. And so I ended up kind of doing a bit of a story format where I talked about how I first got into higher education student affairs, what really inspired me about the field, and where I would like to go. So it was interesting. I actually, full disclaimer, I guess, I was waitlisted originally for the program, and so there was a period where I was in limbo and I wasn't sure if I would be accepted into the September cohort. And so what I ended up doing is going down to New York, hunting down a student in the program that I could talk to, and with this person we kind of went through my resume. She gave me tips on how I could make it quote unquote more American, and so I revised it, and when there was an email sent from NYU saying we still have some slots available, please send us an up-to-date resume. I was like, here's my American resume, take it, yeah. And anyways, it was an interesting process, but yes, I did attend the Career Center's how to write a cover letter, how to write a grad application session, which I found was useful, but I also found that I overthought it tremendously.
I think a big struggle for me was that I had too many interests when I was writing my statement of intent. And you'll find that different institutions that you're applying to will ask you for specific things. So when I was applying to Queen's, it was a 1-page, 8.5 by 11, and the top quarter or a third of the page was instructions. So really I had a box that was about 3/4 of the page to fill, and that's all I could fill. And they specified the font size and the type of font, so I really couldn't go over that designated box. So that really limited what I was able to write about, and really made me think twice about what my interest was. For York, there was a little bit more leeway, and also for U of T. It's actually more daunting when you have more space to write, because you have more space to try to be as eloquent as possible without writing too much about you and more about your interest. I don't know if that resonates or if that makes sense. What I found was really useful too, though, was looking at the specific institutions that I was applying to and what their specific focus was. So for York, the undergraduate Faculty of Education, they focus on language, culture, and teaching, which fit and aligned exactly with what I wanted to do. So being qualified in the area of language, that resonated with me, and then I could look through faculty profiles. So that was another big thing for me, is who are the faculty that teach in that department, what are they studying, what are their interests, and how do my interests align with them. So what I found myself doing is quoting specific professors or faculty from the different institutions in areas that they are interested in, and how I might be able to align my research in that area. So at OISE, for the Center for Urban Schooling, I was able to quote Jim Cummings, who is a big professor there and doing a lot of research there in that area, and quote him and talk a little bit about some of the works that he's written and how that will help me in my research or in my studies. So whether or not I was doing coursework or thesis, it's good to be able to align yourself, at least personally, this is my opinion, to be able to align yourself with a faculty member that's already there, that you can then, if you are accepted or if you're waitlisted or if you're more interested, that you can go and seek out these specific people and say, hey, I really want to do more in the area of this. What courses would you suggest? Or do you know of any other programs in other institutions that I should look at? Or can I audit your class if I don't get accepted? Or something along those lines. And that kind of, I guess, goes along with looking for a supervisor, which is another part if you do get accepted, is when do you do that and how do you know who's the right person? So starting that early for me was really important, because I found that it helped to alleviate some of the stress in figuring out what I wanted to do. Will I know anyone there? Do I know if this is the right program for me? So that was a big part of my statement of interest.
I agree with a lot of these tips. They're great tips. And I think if you start the process early and email the professors back and forth before you write your statement of interest or intent is very helpful. Like on the website, you can type in the professor's name and it'll list their interests. So that's a cue to you to plug those into your statement of interest, the ones that match, right? So for me at York, I chose university governance, leadership development, student development, policy in higher ed, and orientation, and that matched with a certain professor, so I called that professor out in the statement of intent, and I think that's really helpful. So I think if the tips can be, for me, they go into two categories: know yourself and then know your institution. If you know your institution, then you call out the professors, and even state what courses you want to take, and then know yourself, because I agree with Marc. Like I ended up trying to make it really structured, and then I thought I'm just going to tell my story, and then through my story, my interests will come out, and that was the best. So for me,
People love stories.
people love stories, yeah, and also it's more authentic, and that's why I'm saying to be authentic, you need to know yourself before you even try to learn about your institution, because you don't know what to look for if you don't know yourself. So that's it.
And I will just add, there were 3 questions that I asked myself when I got to writing. How do I fit with the institution? How do I fit with this program? And why now?
Yes.
Those are the 3 questions that I tried to tackle.
So at this point, are there any questions from the audience? I have other questions. Just so you. Okay, I'll continue with mine. Marcel? Good. So, how much are, in your opinion, are institutions looking at grades versus experience? Great.
Interesting story, Ross. So, as I mentioned earlier, I participated in a 6-year undergraduate experience. The reason for year 6 was I went into my 6th year with a C+ average. However, this year my GPA was an 8.15. Now, I didn't need to do that because I was accepted based on my grades from before the transcript came through for this year. So it was a lot of fun. I gained a lot of good experience this year as well. However, they asked for a minimum B, 3.0 states, and I was below that and I was still accepted. So I think that as long as you're in that range and you have the experience and you get to meet them and they like you and you've got everything they're looking for, I think experience is a lot more important than grades in this process.
Yeah, I think that because I applied for OISE in York, and I felt that for OISE it was a more of a professional program, and so I thought that my impression, I'm not on the inside, but my impression was that they valued the professional experience more. Even in the reference letters, submit 2 professional reference letters and 1 academic. Okay. Then I went to York option, which was a thesis based, and I could tell they already said submit a written sample of written work. So I could already tell that this was going to be, my grades are going to count more, and they said submit 2 academic reference letters and 1 professional letter. So I could tell that it's different. So it really depends on the focus of the 2 programs. But I think Greg is right, because yours is not a thesis option, and it's more professional as well.
That's correct.
So it matters more, right?
Marc,
I'm not sure. The NYU process was very bizarre to me because of the whole waitlist situation. So I started thinking while I was in limbo, like, I don't know, all these thoughts crept into my head. Do they want a Canadian? I don't know. Like, do they have like a quota for international students in the program? I don't know. All these crazy thoughts came to my mind, and I wasn't sure. I started, the self-doubt creeps in, right? Like, were my marks high enough or enough? Did I do enough extracurriculars? All these little pieces. But in the end, I learned that about, I think it's 400, 300 to 400 people apply for 40 spots in the program. So it's highly competitive. So anyway, I don't know the value that they give to, if they give a little more to academics or extracurriculars or professional experience, or if it's all balanced. I'm not sure.
I think David explained it well. My experience with applying to OISE for the MEd there, within their department, they actually have specific programs that you have to apply to. So within your online application, you apply specifically to, for example, they have a program on second language instruction, and so I had to apply specifically to that program within the Faculty of Education. And I was initially declined from that position and then later accepted when spots opened up. So I think, to me, and again, I don't know because I'm not on the inside like David said, but I would think that at that point it would be the value of the grades if there was a spot that opened. And I think you are submitting a resume as well as a statement of interest plus references, and all of my references asked to see my grades. So especially my academic references from my last year of university, both of my professors asked to see my grades transcript, unofficial, on all of the classes that I took in my last 2 years of university. So for my references, I applied a year after, so I actually took a year off between my undergrad. I graduated in 2010, and I applied to begin my master's in 2011. So I think for my references, it was important, especially academic ones, that my grades were high enough that they could vouch for me as a student, especially going into a research program. But in terms of acceptance, again, it's hard to say because we don't know really what they're looking for, but it seemed as though grades were a portion of it, especially if there's not enough seats or if you're waitlisted and then later accepted. Or
Greg, David?
Actually, really interesting story that I don't think I've told yet. The process I went through to get into grad school was I went to this conference, the Oshkosh Placement Exchange in Wisconsin in March, and there I interviewed for graduate assistant positions at 9 different schools. There's something like 140 schools go to this thing. Maybe 500 or 600 students or potential students are there, and there's 400 positions open. So it's pretty good odds when you get there. And the way it works is you go there, you interview with a bunch of people. It's kind of rapid fire, half-hour interviews for your whole weekend, and then if they like you, they'll invite you to their campus or to do like a second round, maybe on Skype or something. And so you go travel to the school and you interview there, and then they offer you a position, and then you apply for the academic program. And what I was told through that process is that if they like you, or if you're a good fit for the position, that the academics are sort of secondary, and but they also, when they ask to interview you, they want to see an unofficial transcript, and they say that they won't interview you if your grades aren't what they're looking for. Anyway, so for me that was really interesting. It seemed like academics were hardly a factor at all for them, which was kind of cool.
Okay. Just sorry.
Yeah, so for the NYU program, I was waitlisted in the sense that, okay, you meet all the criteria, but now you need to secure an internship. So to get into the program, I needed to interview over the telephone for an internship placement. And only once that was secured, or once I had obtained an internship placement, then I was formally accepted into the program.
About the internships, that's what I was going to say. It seems like grades really mattered to get the GA-ship or the TA-ship, because you had to, some schools, they wanted a separate application, and you need to show what your publications were. You need to show if you had research experience. You need to show your grades. So for the two schools I applied to, the grades really mattered if you wanted to have a job while studying, GA-ship or TA-ship.
It's appropriate. It's always appropriate, Neil.
Just a question about in student affairs. Did you find the demographics quite different in your grad program? Were there older professionals that were in the classroom, or some of you are just going to be joining? Or did you find it a younger demographic, or?
I guess I'm the only one who's in the program already. So my classes right now are a mix of first year and second year master's students. I also have some PhD students in some of my classes. Teachers who are working full time during the day, and then part time masters. And then there are a handful. Actually, there aren't very many. I think there's only one other person who's a professional, student life professional at York that's been in any of my classes, maybe two. So I haven't seen too many, but I know that there are more. Because I'm not currently taking classes in the higher ed stream at York, I haven't seen too many. But there is a range of ages in the classes.
I was recently added to a Facebook group with all of the new members of the cohort, or I guess people in my cohort, and for the most part, the majority of the students are recent graduates of undergraduate degrees. Some are doing their studies part-time, so they either work in New York City or in the New York City area. But most of the students are full-time students, and I would say in their mid to late 20s.
I can't say I know about my program in particular, but I know there's I think about a quarter of the people in the program are doing it online. And I've really only met the full-time people, but when I was at the conference and people were applying for positions, it's a pretty broad range.
I was under the impression that, for example, at OISE, the cohort program, you're gonna be placed with a bunch of other professionals who've been in the field for some 10 years. So if you're looking to network on top of studying, that's a good option.
There's kind of a second part to that too. Have you met people with their masters in student affairs sort of related areas? Have you been able to talk about what sort of careers they're pursuing and how it's benefited them or added value?
Yes. When I went down to Nova for my interview weekend, I met Nova, Southeastern University. When I went down there for the interview weekend, there was a few events that were sort of mix and mingle, and all the I don't know exactly how their hierarchy system works, but in student affairs they have 14 departments, and each department has a director. All the directors have a master's, some of them in student affairs, some not. But the guy that I'll be working for, he got a master's and he's working in student affairs assessment, which is sort of a hot topic around the student affairs industry. So I'm excited to be getting into that. But he said from specializing in that, he got into a director role by age 28, which was pretty exciting for him. So yeah, that's one thing. But there's a lot of people who are getting these degrees done.
I mean, just based on landscape that I see, like all the positions that are posted, is it sort of evolving? It's changing from graduate, some are graduate degree preferred to graduate degree. So I think there's some people in the room that also have it as well, like Brian does. Any other questions? Just okay, so you touched a little bit, and this gets into the internship side of it, and also the GA certification. But how much do these programs actually cost? Because you just most of you just gone through your undergrad, and that was cheap. And what funding opportunities exist?
So something that David and I talked about a lot when David was applying, and an experience that I had, which was really difficult for me. So I actually also applied for a full-time program, and then when I was hired at York, I switched to the part-time. And it's a significant drop in funding because the full-time program is, with a TA-ship, is pretty much you're making money. So you're paying your tuition plus a little bit more. Switching to a part-time, all the funding was taken away. So there were no opportunities at Oise or at York and Queens, I don't remember, for funding in a part-time program. And I was fortunate that I was working full-time, and so I was able to support paying my tuition as well as other expenses. But that was kind of a difficult thing to let go of when you're offered a lot of money to help to work in the faculty, to be a TA, to be a student, and then have that taken away. So, but I still saw the master's program as I'm only a year in, and a year being 3 semesters, but I still saw it as more affordable, if you will, than undergrad. And I guess looking at the undergrad as a full $6,000 or $7,000 versus looking at the master's programs per year, per semester, makes it feel more manageable. But we're looking at about $1,000 per semester, and then in a full-time program, so 2 years, so 6 semesters.
For the 2012-2013 NYU academic calendar, tuition is $33,900. Living expenses is budgeted at $24,000, and health insurance $2,500. So total sum $60,000 a year, and so that's actually estimated to increase by 5% every year. It's
Did you say tuition is
$33,900. Yeah, I know, but it's New York. No.
So you need a really good full-time job.
And there's more. There's more to share because there is no funding at NYU for international graduate students. So this is just wonderful for my parents, and so anyway, that's the reality of the situation. So
Is that right? You OSAP approved?
it may be. I need to look into that. Yeah, it may be. That's right. Greg just asked if NYU is OSAP approved.
Yeah. So my program or my school is OSAP approved, which is nice. But actually, okay. So in order to get my student visa, I guess we're getting personal here. What you need is $35,405. So that's like the grand total, what they expect you to spend over the course of a year. However, it's not so bad. So tuition is $12,000 of that, and then living expenses and everything adds up to they're estimating $35,000. However, with my GA position, residence is fully covered, so that's estimated at $14,000. I have a $5,000 tuition reduction, $7,000 in just being paid for doing my GA position, and a $2,000 meal plan. So all in all, it's going to work out to cost me about the same as a year at York, which is really nice. So
by the students. And then just wrapping up then, what is one piece of advice you wish that someone had told you at a panel such as this when you're going through the application process or you're thinking to apply? What's the one thing?
Start earlier than the applications go live. I think it's easy. It's an obvious piece of advice. But I think looking back in the amount of research that I did about the institutions and about the faculty, about the programs, and then trying to narrow down what my interests were, OISE, the application is due quite early. It's December 1st. And so I think I started my application probably around October, and ideally I would have started in the summer, interviewing faculty and staff even, depending on what my interests were. So I would definitely say start early. So research, funding, faculty, and networks are the big four that I would look at.
100% agree with Dimple. This process has been a year and a half in the making. From when I first discovered the program to taking a campus tour to asking questions of some of the graduate students in the program to actually writing my statement of purpose. So yeah, a year and a half. And so I agree exactly with what Dimple has mentioned.
I have 2 points. First, when you're looking around at schools, really look at the whole school, not just the program, but the faculty. Look at the student services, everything that the school has to offer, and try and find just the right fit for you. And secondly, it's not that hard. Like, I was so intimidated at so many times throughout the process, just thinking about the things I had to do, but in reality, it was actually pretty easy. Like, the biggest moment where I really felt like I couldn't do it was right after I walked out of the how to write your personal statement session. I guess they were trying to prepare us, but I at that moment felt like there's no way I was going to get in, just because they were bracing us for the worst. But it was actually like fairly easy process, and so you can do it. Is my advice.
Yeah, go to the Career Center workshops that we did. It's scary, but it's helpful. And then 2, read literature in the field of student affairs, like academic literature in that field, and subscribe to newsletters in that field, whether it be a caucus report or like academic impressions. Subscribe.
So let's give a round of applause. They'll be staying through lunch, perhaps, so you can connect with them then as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.